Book 3, The Track of a Storm. This is a great visual. It's spring here as I'm doing this annotation, and we've been tracking storms all over the place with tornadoes and all kinds of stuff. So I think of that when I read this title. Just to remind you that from the previous chapter at the end of Book 2, it was August 14th when Charles Darnay set out for Paris. It says that he's traveling slowly from Paris, towards Paris from England in the autumn of 1792. So to me, August 14th is not the autumn. But we will see here as we read about his journey. Once he crosses over to France, it takes him a long time to get to Paris. I'm not exactly sure how long, but it's certainly not, the couple days or something that we would have sort of imagined from the previous journeys that people took there. So it says that the time is full of obstacles. There's citizens everywhere stopping all kinds of people who are coming and going, cross-questioning them, asking for papers, asking for lists, sending them back where they came from, or sending them on, or stopping them once they've sent them on to question them again. So all these people, all these peasants who are basically controlling the country, are stopping every possible person to see what they're about, So it says here that Charles Darnay began to perceive that for him along these country roads, there was no hope of return until he should have been declared a good citizen of Paris. So all this frequent stopping and questioning makes him realize, there's no way he's going to turn back and go back to England without being stopped. Whatever might befall now, he must, on his journey's end, not a mean village closed upon him, not a common barrier dropped across the road behind him, but he knew it to be another iron door in the series that was barred between him and England. The universal watchfulness so encompassed him that if he had been taken in a net or were being forwarded to his destination in a cage, he could not have felt his freedom more completely gone. So what a description. He knows that he's walking into an unknown situation and he will never get out of it until he has hopefully been, chosen as a safe person, as somebody who could be trusted. And I don't know, I don't have much faith in that. He knows there's no turning back. The universal watchfulness not only stopped him on the highway 20 times in a stage, but retarded his progress 20 times in a day by riding after him and taking him back, riding before him and stopping him by anticipation, riding with him and keeping him in charge. So he's just, it's slow going into Paris. So nothing but the production of the afflicted Gabelle's letter from his prison of the Abbey would have got him on so far. His difficulty at the guardhouse in this small place had been such that he felt his journey to have come to a crisis. For sure, it has come to a crisis. And he was therefore as little surprised as a man could be to find himself awakened in the middle of the night by a bunch of patriots. And so he's woken up in the middle of the night. They say, "Emigrant, we're going to take you to Paris under an escort." So naive Charles thinks, oh, okay, that's nice of you. He says, "I desire nothing more than to get to Paris, though I could dispense with the escort." "Silence," growled a red cap, striking at the coverlet with the butt end of his musket. "Peace, aristocrat. You are an aristocrat and must have an escort and must pay for it." So escort is definitely a code word for something else. I would say he's now been taken prisoner and they're making him pay. So they're also taking his money because they can. He has no choice. Charles Darnay recognizes that. "Choice, listen to him," says the scowling red cap, as if it was not a favor to be protected from the lamp iron. So you should be happy that we're escorting you. Not so sure I would believe that. "Rise and dress yourself, emigrant." So an emigrant, just to make sure you understand, is someone who leaves their own country, which is exactly what Charles Darnay did all those many years ago. He recognizes that he has paid a heavy price for this escort, and hence he started with it on the wet roads at 3 o'clock in the morning. That could be a quiz question. So off they go at 3 in the morning with his escort, and it's more than just one person. The escort were 2 mounted patriots in red caps and tricolored cockades, armed with national muskets and sabers, who rode one on either side of him. A cockade was a ribbon, multicolored ribbons that the revolutionaries put in their red caps, and we'll see these referred to again. So 2 men are escorting him into Paris. One of them, so Darnay governs his own horse, so he rides his own horse, but there's a loose line attached to his bridle, and the end of that is in one of the patriots' hands. And so he's clearly being led and held as he travels. In this state, they set forth with the sharp rain driving in their faces, clattering at a heavy dragoon trot over the uneven town pavement and out upon the mire-deep road. So it's wet, it's rainy. Also doesn't quite align in my mind with August, which makes me think either it's just bad weather. I mean, certainly in Europe there can be bad weather, or maybe it's a little later. It's not August anymore. But we don't really know. So it says they traveled in the night, halting an hour or 2 after daybreak and lying by until the twilight fell. So they're only traveling in the dark. And so I'd be curious why that is. He's escorted now. It's interesting. Perhaps these escorts want to make sure they maintain possession of him. Maybe that's easier than in the daylight. Maybe they're trying to avoid being stopped as often. Maybe they're trying to avoid violence, but whatever reason, they're only traveling at night. The escorts themselves are wretchedly clothed. They twisted straw around their bare legs, and they put straw over their shoulders to keep them dry. So this is just a reminder, these are poor people who are running the country at this point. One of the patriots is chronically drunk, so one of the guys is completely wasted the whole time that they're riding. And Darnay did not allow the restraint of what was laid upon him to awaken any serious fears in his breast, for he reasoned with himself that it could have no reference to the merits of an individual case that was not yet stated, and of representations confirmable by the prisoner in the abbey that were not yet made. So he's really being strong. He's trying to reassure himself that, he shouldn't be afraid. These people don't know his story. He's here. He's coming to save Gabelle, who is someone who is not really deserving of imprisonment, and he believes that his story is going to save him. But when they came to the town of Beauvais, which they did at eventide, when the streets were filled with people, he could not conceal from himself that the aspect of affairs was very alarming. So this is like, early evening. It's not dark yet, and people are all over the place in the street in Beauvais, and this is why they've been traveling at night. All the crowd starts to yell at them, "Down with the emigrant." He stopped in the act of swinging himself out of his saddle, this is Darnay, and resuming it as his safest place. So he decides, I better not get off the horse. I should stay on the horse. He says, "Emigrant, my friends, do you not see me here in France of my own will? Like, I didn't flee my country. I'm coming back on my own, by my own choice." And the crowd yells, "You're a cursed immigrant." And this is a farrier who yells this. And a farrier is a man who makes horseshoes. So that's something that, we wouldn't know today, but that's what a farrier is. One of the guys who's, leading Darnay's horse says, let him be, he will be judged at Paris." And then the farrier yells, "Judged, aye, and condemned as a traitor." And then he swings his hammer, and the whole crowd yells with approval. So I'm sure Darnay feels a little nervous. He says, "Friends," which is a kind way to address these crazy people, "I am not a traitor." "He lies," cried the smith. "He is a traitor since the decree." So this is news to Darnay, and when they get a little bit away from the crowd, Darnay asks his escorts, "What is this decree?" And they say, the decree is for selling the property of immigrants. And it turns out that was passed on the 14th of August, which was the day that Darnay left England. So this could be a quiz question. When did Darnay leave? August 14th. That was the same day that there was a decree that any property of immigrants would be sold. So everybody says it is but one of several and that there will be others, if there are not already, banishing all immigrants and condemning all to death who return. So the leaders of the little escorts are saying, you know, this is only one decree. There are going to be more, and they anticipate that it would be that if any immigrants come back into the country, that they would be killed. And so this could be another quiz question. We don't know yet if this decree has been made, but they anticipate that it will be soon. And so Darnay tries to clarify, but there are no such decrees yet. And the postmaster says, I don't know. There may be, or there will be. It's all the same. What would you have? So like, who knows? But it's probably going to happen. So on this whole journey, there's very little sleep. It says that in the dead of night, you know, there are people circling hand in hand around a shriveled tree of liberty, or drawn together singing the Liberty Song. This is what they encounter when they get to small towns. People did plant liberty trees. They would plant little trees and name them liberty trees as a way to sort of have hope for the future and to be a symbol for the revolution. And finally, they get to the wall of Paris. The barrier was closed and strongly guarded when they rode up to it. And the man at the gate says, where are the papers of this prisoner? So this is the first time that Charles Darnay has heard this disagreeable word. But I mean, as a reader, I'm sort of seeing him as a prisoner since the minute those two escorts started leading his horse. He takes notice that he was a free traveler and a French citizen in charge of an escort, which the disturbed state of the country had imposed upon him and which he had paid for. So he's like, I'm not a prisoner. I paid for this escort. So he is very naive, even though a part of him recognizes that things are very alarming and very scary. There's some words here you might not know, ingress and egress. They're talking about the fact that every time somebody comes to Paris, there is a lot of waiting. You have to stand in line and wait to be checked at the entrance as you come and go from the city. So that while ingress into the city for peasants' carts bringing supplies, you know, was relatively easy. So people coming in, ingress with supplies was often prioritized because people need to eat. But egress, leaving the city, even for the homeliest people, was very difficult. So there's a numerous medley of men and women lined up. Identification is so strict that they filtered through the barrier very slowly. In fact, some people even laid down and took naps while they waited for their turn to be checked and let into the city. So finally, they get up to the front, and it's Darnay's turn, and they ask him to get off his horse. And as soon as he does, they take his horse, and they rode away without entering the city. So they basically drop Darnay at the gate, and they leave him, and they take his horse. So as soon as he gets through the gate, Citizen Defarge is called. And up comes Citizen Defarge, and the man at the gate says, is this the emigrant Evrémonde? And Defarge says, yes, this is the man. And they ask him his age, and Darnay says he's 37, asks if he's married, and he says yes. They ask where Darnay was married. He says in England. And where is your wife? In England. Without a doubt, you are consigned, Evrémonde, to the prison of La Force. So this is shocking. Just heaven, exclaimed Darnay. Under what law and for what offense? He can't believe he's just going to be sent straight to prison. The officer looked up from his slip of paper for a moment. We have new laws, Evrémonde, and new offenses since you were here. He says it with a hard smile and went on writing. He says, Darnay says, I entreat you to observe that I have come here voluntarily in response to that written appeal of a fellow countryman which lies before you. I demand no more than the opportunity to do so without delay. Is not that my right? Emigrants have no rights, Evrémonde, was the stolid reply. And then they write that he is to be imprisoned in secret. So we will discover what this means. Defarge motioned with the papers to the prisoner that he must accompany him. The prisoner obeyed. So Darnay follows Defarge. And Defarge says quietly to him, "Is it you who married the daughter of Dr. Manette, once a prisoner in the Bastille that is no more?" "And yes," Darnay says. And then Defarge says, "My name is Defarge, and I keep a wine shop in the Quarter Saint Antoine. Perhaps you have heard of me." Well, Darnay has. He says, "Yes, my wife came to your house to reclaim her father. Yes." So I'm sure Darnay has a little hope that, oh, maybe this is a friend who can help me. The word wife seemed to serve as a gloomy reminder to Defarge to say with sudden impatience, "In the name of that sharp female newly born and called La Guillotine, why did you come to France?" So Defarge is angry because he knows that there is no justice for Darnay, and he, as a revolutionary, has no ability to help him, and he wishes he had stayed in London, where he belongs. And Darnay still doesn't get it. He's like, "I told you why I came, and do you not believe it to be the truth?" And Defarge said, "Yeah, a bad truth for you." And Darnay says, "I am so lost here. Will you render me a little help?" And Defarge says, "None." "Will you answer me a single question?" "Perhaps." And then Darnay says, "In this prison that I am going to so unjustly, shall I have some free communication with the world outside?" And Darnay says, "You will see. I am not to be buried there, prejudged, without any means of presenting my case." Just notice the reference, buried. We have a lot of recalling to life and burying in this story. "You will see. But what then? Other people had been similarly buried in worse prisons before now." So he's referring to the peasants who'd been put in prison for crimes that they really didn't commit by the aristocracy, which is why we have a revolution. And Charles Darnay says, "But not by me. Like, I personally did not do that." He doesn't understand. It doesn't matter. If he's part of the aristocratic class, he's considered the enemy. So Darnay says, "It is of utmost importance to me that I should be able to communicate with Mr. Lorry of Tellson's Bank, an English gentleman who is now in Paris. The simple fact, without comment, that I have been thrown into the prison of La Force." So he wants someone to tell Mr. Lorry he's in prison. "Will you cause that to be done for me?" So he's like, "Can you at least get to Mr. Lorry and tell him I'm in prison?" And Defarge says, "I will do nothing for you. I will do nothing for you." He makes it very clear his duty is to his country and the people, not to Darnay. So this is important. I could see this being a quiz question. He's not going to tell Mr. Lorry. This next paragraph is talking about the fact that as Darnay is being ushered through the city to La Force prison, and by the way, La Force prison was a real place. There were several prisons in Paris, and of course, once the Bastille fell, they needed other places. So La Force is now the prison being used for the aristocrats. But as they walk through the city, nobody really notices him. You know, here's a man with good clothes, should be going to prison, was no more remarkable than a laborer in working clothes going to work. So it's very common. Charles Darnay also finds out that the king is in prison and that the foreign ambassadors have one and all left Paris. So this is another important detail. Louis XVI is in prison. On the road, except at Beauvais, he had heard absolutely nothing. The escort and the universal watchfulness had completely isolated him. So he learns all this when he gets to Paris, that, you know, all these people have either left or they are in prison. That he had fallen among far greater dangers than those which had developed themselves when he left England, he, of course, knew now. So now he realizes how much in danger he is, that perils had thickened about him fast and might thicken faster and faster. Of course, he knew now. He could not but admit to himself that he might not have made this journey if he could have foreseen the events of a few days. So he's acknowledging, probably shouldn't have done this. This was a mistake. He tries to hang on to ignorant hope that once someone hears his story, he will be spared. The sharp female newly born and called La Guillotine was hardly known to him or to the generality of people by name. The frightful deeds that were soon to be done were probably unimagined at that time in the brains of the doers. How could they have a place in the shadowy conceptions of a gentle mind? So the guillotine has just been created. Even the people who created the guillotine don't know how terrible things will become in terms of how many people will die having their heads chopped off from the guillotine. So he gets to the devil. He gets to the devil. I keep saying the word devil. He gets to the prison, and a man with a bloated face opens the door and announces the emigrant Evermond. And the man with the bloated face, who's obviously like the person who lets the prisoners in at the jail, what the devil, how many more of them? So this prison is very full. What the devil, I say again, exclaimed the jailer, left to his wife. How many more? The gaoler's wife, being provided with no answer to the question, merely replied, one must have patience, my dear. So this is a common characteristic. The women have patience. The women are steadfast. They don't get impatient or angry or frustrated with the revolution. They're very devoted. It's the men who are a little bit more inconsistent in their devotion, but not these women. So the prison of La Force, as we would expect, is gloomy, dark, and filthy with a horrible smell of foul sleep in it. It's such an interesting description. Extraordinary how soon the noisome flavor of imprisoned sleep becomes manifest in all the places that are ill cared for. So it's just not, it's a terribly run prison. These places are not clean or well kept. In secret, too, grumbled the jailer, looking at the written paper, as if I was not already full to the bursting. So he doesn't know where he's going to put him. He stuck the paper on a file, and Charles Darnay awaited his further pleasure, which is sarcastic, for half an hour, sometimes pacing to and fro, sometimes just sitting down on the stone seat. Finally, they start to bring him into the prison, and as they walk into the prison, they enter a room full of prisoners. And this is an interesting description. There are men just standing around, and there are women seated at tables reading, writing, and knitting. These are all the aristocrats, and they are very proper. It says that as soon as Darnay comes in, they all at once get up to receive him with every refinement of manner known to the time, and with all the engaging graces and courtesies of life. So like they properly greet him, as would be typical of their class. So strangely clouded were these refinements by the prison manners and the gloom. So it's so odd that they're like so proper and nice in this terrible place. And Charles Darnay seemed to stand in a company of the dead. This is an interesting description. Ghosts all. The ghost of beauty, the ghost of stateliness, of elegance, of pride, frivolity, wit, youth, age. All eyes were changed by the death they had died in coming there. So they're proper, kind people to their own, but because they're in a prison, they look like ghosts because, of course, parts of them are dying on the inside day by day. It struck him motionless. In the name of the assembled companions in misfortune, said a gentleman of courtly appearance, I have the honor of giving you welcome to La Force. May it soon terminate happily. Like he's hoping that he doesn't have to stay there long. Can I ask your name and condition? And Charles Darnay roused himself, gave the required information in words as suitable as he could find. And then the gentleman says, I hope that you are not in secret. And Charles says, I do not understand the meaning of that term, but I have heard them say so. Oh, what a pity. We so regret it. But take courage. Several members of our society have been in secret at first, but it has lasted but a short time. I grieve to inform the society in secret. He tells everybody around him. There was a murmur of commiseration as Charles Darnay crossed the room to a grated door where the jailer, or the gaoler, awaited him, and many voices, among which the soft and compassionate voices of women were conspicuous, gave him good wishes and encouragement. He turned at the grated door to render the thanks of his heart. It closed under the gaoler's hand, and the apparitions vanished from his sight forever. The wicket opened on a stone staircase leading upward, and I just noticed there's a typo here. It should say when they had ascended 40 steps. The prisoner of half an hour already counted them. The gaoler opened a low black door, and they passed into a solitary cell. It struck cold and damp, but was not dark. I mean, this could possibly also be a quiz question. Solitary cell, cold and damp, but not dark. Yours, said the gaoler. Why am I confined alone? How do I know? So to be in secret is to be in a solitary cell. It's solitary confinement. Can I buy pen, ink, and paper? And the guard says, you will be visited and can ask then. At present, you may buy your food and nothing more. So in the cell, there's a table, a chair, a table, and a straw mattress. There's a general inspection made of the room by the guard. This gaoler was so unwholesomely bloated, both in face and person, as to look like a man who'd been drowned and filled with water. So, and that kind of reminds me of the description of the guy, too, at the gate. So all these people, and we had descriptions of some of the people in the other towns looking this way too, like they're pale and they're unhealthy, and you don't really, I mean, they're not well fed. Remember, everything is burned. The crops don't really yield anything. So these are people who are malnourished. They're drinking probably most of their meals because a lot of them were drunk all the time. So clearly, like they're sick. They're very much sick. And Charles says, now am I left as if I were dead. And here in these crawling creatures is the first condition of the body after death. So Charles recognizes that in that straw mattress are all kinds of bugs, and he's going to have to sleep there. And that's just like what happens when you die. The bugs of the earth, could start eating your body and creating like a carcass of yourself. And it's a very disgusting image. So this is an important reference. This is how large his cell is. 5 paces by 4.5. Repeated, 5 paces by 4.5. 5 paces by 4.5. He made shoes, he made shoes, he made shoes. The prisoner counted the measurement again and paced faster to draw his mind with him from that latter repetition. The ghosts that vanished when the wicket closed, there was one among them, the appearance of a lady dressed in black, who was leaning in the embrasure of a window, and she had a light shining upon her golden hair, and she looked like Lucy. So he's remembering when he left that crowd of prisoners in the main room. He saw one of them standing in the light of a window, and her hair was blonde. Let us ride on again, for God's sake, through the illuminated villages with the people all awake. He made shoes, he made shoes. So he's just got like all the thoughts and the words of the last few days just tumbling around in his mind. He's remembering Dr. Manette. He's pacing back and forth and counting the size of his cell. The prisoner walked faster and faster, obstinately counting and counting, and the roar of the city changed to this extent that it still rolled in like muffled drums, but with the wail of voices that he knew and the swell that rose above them. So this is becoming very personal now. This storm is personal, obviously. So Charles is imprisoned. That's an important detail. Defarge cannot do anything for him. A lot of the things I've underlined here could very well be quiz questions about what kind of prisoners were there. These well-to-do people who greeted him politely. We definitely had traveling by night, that it's raining, that on the day he left London, which was August 14th, they put this decree in place that immigrants, have no rights and that their property is going to be sold. So Charles is in a very, very bad way.